We're on another trip out to a Kickback show, and this time we're not heading south, we're actually heading over to our old stomping ground of Manchester. So instead of a prison, this time it's in a station, Central Station, which has not been a train station for as long as I can remember, and I was born in Manchester in the 50s. We can do it in a day. Not going to trouble the van this time. In one of my more ambitious moments, I was actually hoping to get the Cafe Racer ready for this show and maybe even ride it over. It's good to have ambitions. They're frequently not fulfilled. Maybe for the next show. The thing about going to a custom show though is you see some really great ideas, as well as some rather stupid ones, but you never know what you might pick up and want to use yourself. It always makes me smile when I drive past the farmhouse in the middle of the M62. But more importantly to me, the road over in the distance is one that I remember very well from my 20s and 30s. I lived just north of Manchester, and the twists and turns along there and down into Yorkshire were absolutely fabulous. I can remember riding a Fireblade, a Power Valve, and even some really old iron like a GS 750. Happy days. I really do love the trips back to Manchester, although the young gun might get a bit fed up with some of the nostalgic tales that I'm always trotting out. Interestingly, with sat-nav these days it's a lot easier to find your way around the city, although with all the modern buildings that have gone up it does feel a little bit like you're visiting science fiction. And I must be getting old because the expected £25 for parking didn't scare me off. Central Station's really in the middle of the city and it's a great venue, it's a great big indoor space. I was really looking forward to coming to a show here. Although the bike part of the show wasn't quite as big as I expected, there was plenty of room to see everything and there's some really interesting bikes. It's great to get ideas from what other people have done on their 70s and 80s Japanese bikes. But the other part of the show that is really important is to remember is that it is a custom show. And you see some of the bikes that have had paintwork and engineering modifications that are just out of this world. In fact, imagine if you just got a slight scratch on something like this, you'd probably never get over it. It's great to see bikes that you've actually followed the build of on YouTube. This one from Tomboy a Bit is a 750 single overhead cam Honda like I'm building, but she's taken it to the next level with some modifications that I dream of but I haven't yet started to think of doing for myself. I wasn't overly keen on this seat unit when she was first putting it together, but it actually turned out quite well. And the original stamping on the exhaust really makes an interesting touch. Although I love my Honda 750s, I do always find myself drawn to these bikes. This one's a 76 XS650 twin. I really like these Yamahas. I'm staggered I've never had one. Never say never, maybe next bike I buy. I really like the simple lines that the person who's built this has gone for. I think this would be a great bike to actually bob about on. It wouldn't be a custom show without Harley. Harley Davidson really have the style off to a T. And even when you're looking at the customs, they've got every point covered. Hand shift, foot clutch, chrome to die for. I really do like these old Harleys. And even though it wasn't the biggest show, there was still so much to see that I'm sure I missed some things. And as usual, I get drawn to the XS650. Another this type Cafe Racer style one. I'm not sure if this engine's suited to this style of bike, but it still had such a wonderful finish. An interesting use of an iPhone, I suspect for sat-nav. In my previous video someone had said I'd missed their BSA. I'm not sure if this was the one, but I've definitely seen it before. Not quite sure what the barbed wire's for, but I really like the patina and the way that this has been put together. It looks so old school. Don't know if I'd like to ride it, but I really would have it as an ornament in my living room if my living room was big enough. There was a good number of the old school type choppers, and I've seen this style of bike on some of the sort of American videos. This one called the penny farthings. It has such a massive front wheel. The young gun thought it was interesting. I'm not sure if it was the paintwork that he was admiring though. I really like the display of CCMs. Although they were all the same frame, same engine and pretty much same running gear, everyone looked different. I think they've got the market cornered on turning out a custom finished bike. After a good look round, we decided it's time for lunch and got out our sandwiches. That and the flask. Always you can tell a northerner. We walked through into the other side where it first starts off with a little bit of a fairground. Wasn't that keen on going on this Ferris wheel myself, but we did think about it. And then we had a quick tour through the tattoo section, which was probably about 2/3 to 3/4 of the space in the hall that was used for that. Every stall had somebody having a tattoo and seemed to be booked up. Very few of them had walk-ins. There was also some kind of weightlifting competition going on, which seemed a little bit incongruous. But then we got back into the bike hall to see if we could see anything that hadn't caught our eye so far, because there was still so much to see. I really like bikes with patina, and the paint on this, although it's probably less than a year old, looked like it had come from the 40s. Some of the tyre choices were a bit interesting, and I'm not sure about having a speed triple on knobblies. Might be exciting, and hopefully the seat's ready for your buttock clenching experiences as you're going around. I always reminisce about my speed triple, but I did spot that this wasn't quite what it first seemed.
First person to count the bikes.
I had an orange one.
I always wanted one of these GSX 1100s, although I think this had a bit of a modified engine. In the previous show we saw this bike and it seemed to have gathered a trailer now. Another bike from my wish list, another Yamaha, interestingly enough. I restored one of these, but not to this standard. The paintwork on the tank, I'm sure I've seen that on a modern Triumph, but the engine finish was second to none. And it had some really good ideas about what you could do with the conical hub to give it a little bit of cooling. I did like this Harley. I liked the actual, the whole look of it, and especially the all-in suspension. What a great look it has. All too soon, it was time for us to leave, as we wandered out into the sunshine in Manchester, which is commonly known as Rainy City. We had a quick look round the bikes that were parked outside before getting back onto the motorway and making our way home. When we said goodbye to Central Station, we were most surprised to find the parking had only been £13, not the expected £25. Here we are back in Yorkshire, not far from home now. We've had an absolutely fantastic day out, saw some brilliant bikes. Luckily we avoided having a tattoo this time, but you never know next time. Can't wait for the next show. If you've enjoyed this and you're interested in the projects we are doing, why not subscribe? Thanks very much for watching no matter what, and if you could give us a thumbs up, you're the best.